Okay, when I first went to Pavones, I rented a little airplane just like this out of Hatch's arsenal of airplanes and flew down. This one happens to be mine. I bought it brand new at the factory and sent my 2 Costa Rican pilots up to flight safety, and they trained there. And now that little bay at the very bottom is the Gulf of Dulce. And on the southern end of that bay is the area where our properties are. As you see in this picture here, I'd come down and buzz the cantina real close, and they'd come up and pick me up 10 minutes away by air. And I'd be in for another 8 or 10 days, and I'd spend 2 or 3 days up in the city. That's what I saw when I first flew over and saw the wave, and then a little farther down saw the sawmill. And of course, I got excited and went in and found Cuyo Lobo and worked out a bill of sale, and we bought it. There's the sawmill. Of course, you don't see any waves there at the time. None of these houses are in. This is it. And then we had to start barging our materials in. But this is our flight in and out of Pavones. All right, what you're going to see here is all the materials that had to come into Pavones for me to carve this out of the jungle came in by water. I built 2 barges. Actually, I built 3. One an oil fuel barge and 2 cargo barges like this one. And we stuffed them with cargo, brought them in at high tide, pulled them up on the beach, tied them to trees, and let the tide go out. And after the tide went out, we'd grade the sand in front of it and haul all this. This is all Rica. I see stacks of cement. You see some of my equipment here. I still see some of this equipment laying around in Golfito that was stolen from me and sold right there in Golfito. It didn't get very far away. Some of the tractors I used for farming. I had trailers that the tractors could haul. All the cargo that come off the barges, the cement, the Rica. You see even a gas tank in there. This is a class rice harvester. I bought 2 of those to harvest the thousands of acres of rice I put in. They had a Mercedes engine in them. This is my smallest tractor, a Komatsu. It had a nice winch on the back, and I used to use that for pulling logs from the farms out and from the beach up. You'll see that it can haul a pretty good sized log. Logs like this is an ajo tree, very hard wood, acidy flavor. The bugs didn't eat it. I built a lot of the bridges that are on the property out of these long ajo logs. And they're still there 30 years later. We did a lot of farming. As far down as that beach as you can see, we had farms. Well, what you're going to see here is the first farm I bought. It had a sawmill on it already. A lot of the work was done by these chainsaws, and they're big chainsaws. They have to cut through these trees, and the saw was a crude sawmill, very dangerous. It wouldn't be passed by OSHA right now. And a lot of handwork went into cutting these logs. This is Wilbur Lobo, one of the sons of the guy I bought it from. And that dangerous looking circular saw there would take the edges off, and we'd cut, if you'll notice, these trees had all been fallen already. The bark has been rotted off over the years, a lot of it, and they were laying around. And I originally bought this sawmill to keep them from cutting the beautiful trees in the first stand forest that they had in the area. I'm in love with those trees. And this is a crude sawmill, but it was good enough to saw the planks and the lumber to build our first houses with. Of course, all the equipment is in. You see the tractors and stuff in the background. And I soon found out that they couldn't really handle logs even that big. And although the labor was cheap, we'd have to run through and saw with a kind of a planking apparatus here, cut these logs down small enough to saw planks off of. That's Carlos Lobo, another one of Cuyo Lobo's son, the original buyer. And there's our sawdust pile. I eventually bought a great big bandsaw, and I could bring in larger and larger logs. I could saw an 8-foot round log, and we bought them from all over the Gulf and all around, and trucked them in and cut lumber, stacked it, put our lumber yard in like that. And but all these photos here, all this photography is the old sawmill that I was operating and built the first houses in Pavones out of. You'll see as we go along, there's more, there's bigger projects going, and we needed a bigger saw. Okay, the footage you're going to see here is some of the early construction footage when I'm trying to build up my compound. You see a lot of tanks, Rica roofing coming off, Rica tanks. I use Rica because it lasts for years and years. It's not like the zinc that wears out in 2 or 3 years. So we built it to stay in place for 10 or 15 years. All these are local workers. I'd buy them equipment, and they all learned construction. The lens on Spider's camera here is a wide-angle lens, and all these poles are not quite bowed like it appears in this. And there's a series of 4 houses, 2-story houses I put in for us to live in right here on the compound, that I call it. And we had the sawmill there. We had our office, our bookkeepers, the kitchen. We fed everyone here. We employed everyone that was down there. This is Wilbur Lobo, one of the owner's sons. They all got in. I built him a house. I built his brother a house. We're building the wood shop here. This structure is a house. When I first went in, here's a house right here. I was building it for myself, and it was kind of an A-frame structure. Here's the water tower right there. We put a couple of big tanks upstairs there and built a house underneath it, and it was one of the first structures on the farm because we needed water. And as the house goes on, it shows my house, the progress on that. There's the start of the water tower house. And there's the water tower house when it's finished. Mike Henson lived here when he first came down. These coming scenes are Rancho Del Mar, and I see it even goes up to the cantina, which is up by Rio Claro. This is after the cantina went in 1966, which is about 3 or 4 kilometers up from this scene, which is Rancho Del Mar. All the beach property that I had, besides the compound that went in, was, and the nurseries you see there in the foreground. Then it pans around here, and you can see the cultivated fields. These are all rice crops that are in there. And then the wood shop, which the squatters burned down, and I won my case from Ida because of their violent temperament. We raised a lot of rice, sorghum, peanuts, right up to the sawmill. All the flat beachfront property that I had, I cleared and planted several different species of rice. This is a dry rice, and our crops were just fabulous there. We hired the best agronomists. We'd sell all of our rice to a processor, and of course the processors always get the better end of the deal, because you never know how many pounds they really get and how much rice is really produced. But our big emphasis was on our tree crops, and these are all cacao that you make chocolate from. The cacao, we had about 7 or 8 different species from different parts of the world. We brought seeds in from the Andaman Islands, all over the world, through Africa, the different places they produce chocolate. And it was perfect climate for cacao. We knew it grew good, and we hybridized a lot of them. I brought in agronomists from local agronomists from San Jose. Some of them were American, some were Costa Rican. But even the girls could work there in the nurseries. We had acres of nurseries that we raised all of our own seed crop. Planted all these trees, and we planted in the 16, 17 farms that I had cacao in the areas that was good for cacao in the forest. And quite often the squatters would come in when I was gone, chop all of our 1- and 2-year-old cocoa trees down, not even knowing what they were, and plant a crop of beans, which can from start to finish in 5 months. And they said, well, we improved the property. We cut out all this terrible tree shrubs and put in this beautiful crop of beans. And they would try to squat on the property. And that went on for years, even after I left. They tried to claim the property by chopping all my trees that we planted, thousands and thousands of them. Of course, the rice was good. It needed the rain a certain time of the year, and it needed the heat. And we had several different varieties of rice. And these palm leaves I hauled in to be shade trees. They would shade the little coconut trees or the cocoa trees that I would put in. You see all the little palms cracked up. Those are all cocoa trees in the area that couldn't handle the direct sunlight, and we had to put a little bit of a filter, sun filter. These are different, this is a variety of pines. I tried putting in pines in certain areas. They didn't take too well. We did well with 3 different species of orange trees that we put in. They grew all year round. We put in some nice avocado trees, but we did a lot of work in this cocoa right here. That's a fresh little cocoa, and that one is a good seed crop for a rootstock, and we graft in and put a better producing tree. After about 6 or 8 months in or a year in the ground, we put a better tree in. But this is how the land would look as we were planting it. It would be chopped down, freshly chopped. The tree would go in, and then we'd put in the palm frond over the top to shade it from the first 4, 5, 6 months of sunlight. And then it became strong enough to hold itself up and withstand nature. But we had a great time putting these in. All these people learned a lot about planting, and they're able to do it on their own farms when I was absent. Well, the livestock on the ranch in the beginning was horses, and I'd bring them out on the barge. You've probably seen some footage of this horse. It's an Andalus horse. But I raised basically Peruvian Pasos and Pasafinos. My daughter loved horses, and we had probably 8 or 10 mares and 2 or 3 nice stallions. I had the champion of Costa Rica. We had a lot of cattle towards the end, but we always had cattle around to eat and to get milk for the babies that were in the compound, and the people around would come down, bring their daughters down that worked at the ranch. They'd bring their kids down. You'd have to have milk. Well, life at the ranch was really pleasant. And what you see here are some of the early is some of the early footage of the ranch, the beautiful sunsets. I bought a lot of animals around to feed the people. Everyone had something to sell, or all of a sudden things started happening for everyone in Pavones. They had work. They could sell their chickens, their cows, their horses. My daughter loved it. I had about 4 of those little trucks like that. There's my daughter, my son Gus, a few people in the back. This is before there were roads. We had to drive the beach, and we kind of scraped off the rock when we first got a tractor to get in on the beach. And this is very typical of how we went in and out from Golfito and hauled our cargo and everything. Of course, I grew up on the beach. I've been a waterman all my life. And going to the surf is nothing to me. It's just a matter of getting your rig positioned to buck through the waves. I knew how to bring those barges in at the right tide. And you just have to be patient. Wait for the tide, wait for the waves. And pretty soon it all works for you. But it's a typical trip into Golfito. There's a kid from the United States that came down, worked in my leather shop with me, Paul Morticini. He was a great worker there. I gave him a ranch up right next to Rio Claro. And I bought the ranch for, I think, $80,000. And then after a few years, he wanted to go home, and I paid him $100,000 for it. So I bought the ranch twice. This is going from Golfito right through a little river called the La Trocha. That's how you get into Pavones. We all kind of sat around. These are all my workers. The compound was in. It was a real comfortable place when the sun went down and after work. That's one of my carpenters there, my son Gus. But we all worked together, and we were all kind of a family. And this girl was a great cook, great personality. She could cook up a great meal. Everyone ate there. We fed them all. These are the Masang family. These girls and their kids. That's what the cow was in there for. All these little girls. They all had babies. A lot of these girls marry at 14 down there, and spawn all these other little ticos. They were all my family, and it was kind of a wood-burning stove. It was a new life for me, and it was certainly a new life for them. They had a little prosperity. There's Cuyo Lobo jumping into one of our compound trucks. That's the first guy I bought Rancho Del Mar from. That's the guy in the bar. Here's some fishermen going out. A lot of fishermen come in and eat at the restaurant. This actually is down, they'd anchor out in front, and I'd take them in and out to their boat with my canoe. Okay, well, the surfing, of course, speaks for itself. Here's one of the very first boards these guys attempted building themselves. Mike Henson went down and thought the shape was so great he made several boards like this for himself. His better surfing designs from these ticos. Enough for that, and here's an old man surfing. Here's the cantina when I first put it up in 1966, and you'll notice there are a lot of local surfers that watched the surfers that came down and had a great time with the boards that some of these surfers left behind and learned to surf themselves. Here's a local surfer working his way through a small, comfortable wave. And here's the great Spider Wells walking through the beach here, down by the river. You do some filming, and that brings to an end this brief footage on the history and the making of Rancho Del Mar.